How's it going, folks? Jack here. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been receiving a lot of recommendations for like comedy videos and stuff that some of you wanted me to react to. One amongst which was a bit by Josh Carlin, which was called Dumb Americans. You know, one of the easiest thing to dunk on, right? It's as old as time by now. It's not a new trend. When a person like him, who was always seemed to be like a visionary, will talk about that, then you know that it's truly a problem. But while watching and recording that video, there was a part, at least a couple of which, that seemed to always be recurrent when we're talking about the US. These topics being those of education and the American healthcare system. And of course, in the latter point, you might have seen that the CEO of United Healthcare was shot in broad daylight in New York City just a couple of days ago. And when an event like this happens, obviously it's important to note that two things can be true at the same time. One can easily, very easily denounce political or violence just as a whole. That should not be your immediate mode of problem solving when you're being frustrated about something. Yet the response to his passing was way different than some would have done for a person of any other status. So instead of just reacting to that bit of the 2005 special by Josh Carlin and just simply talking about my ideas of the healthcare system in the US, that is, I wanted to use the current event here as a segue to kind of have a conversation of how it feels to like hear and witnessing this type of things coming abroad in comparison to, let's say, a system like what we have here in Denmark. Because in the least, one thing that you cannot disagree on is that when a certain subject is getting people united to that degree, regardless of political allegiances, right? The left or right dichotomy is something that I tend to deem as being like political astrology. People's political views aren't that simple to simply be polarized. But in the least, when an event like this happens and it unites people, I think this is something that's worth talking about and taking seriously. Alright, so when you live in Denmark, there's this one thing that gets handed to you. My daughter, who is now 2, received one as well when we moved. It's something that gets sent to you by the public offices. It is this card here. I can't show you the full numbers because obviously it's important to me, but it's called Sundhedskort or sygesikringsbevis, or your healthcare card. It's a yellow one that carries both the name of your doctor, your address, and your social security number. With this, you can have access to just about anything when you need to be treated in hospitals, where you need to have a checkup, whatever it might be healthcare related, for the most part, is how you get access to that. When you go to a pharmacy, your prescriptions are always written through that, and you get access to your prescribed medicine by just scanning your card at the pharmacy. So everything just works in one system. And the thing is this, once you start working in Denmark as a teenager, you get a part-time job, and you have a certain threshold every year that you need to reach before starting to pay taxes, right? A free card, that's what we call it. Once you get past that threshold, that usually is about 50,000 Danish crown or circa $7,000, you start paying taxes automatically. And it accounts for a 38% of the amount that you earn every month, with an additional 8% for the working market. So in total, for the most part, you will be paying 46%, almost half of what you earn. And now the thing is that often, I remember making a video about like 6 years ago when some Fox News host, Trish Reagan, I believe was her name, that was criticizing the Danish system of taxation and how it was that Danish students apparently weren't taking things seriously and making cupcakes cafes.
Nowadays, all the kids graduating from school in Denmark, they want to start cupcake cafes.
Cupcakes. What do you have against cupcakes? Are cupcakes now a symbol for socialism? Is this something that I don't know? Hey, I need some information here, come on! It was an odd time, but she got grilled by the whole wild world to the point where even the Danish ministry had to chime in to talk about that. But with that, what I'm trying to say is that one of the criticisms that Denmark tends to get is about our taxation, how extensive it is. The thing about this is that there are countries that pay way more taxes than we do. The thing with Denmark, however, is that we are way more transparent than most countries with how our taxes are paid and where they go to. Now, this to say, given that Denmark and our Scandinavian neighbors, as well as Nordic countries such as Finland, tend to be used as a model to what other OECD nations should be striving towards, the tax that we pay actually goes back to the public's benefit. But of course, more poignant to today's topic is the Danish healthcare system and how much we actually spend. As you can see here, the healthcare expenditure is that of almost 263 billion Danish crown every year, where the private insurance firm only account for 7 billion of that. Like every country in the last decade, this expenditure has been rising steadily, and of course here with COVID it more or less exploded. And this of course had a lot to do with the fact that the country was closed and the government had to provide a lot of subsidies to not just companies but of course the average citizen who was self-isolating. And it has since of course been steadily decreasing ever since. Yet still, with this insane rise in expenditure, if you still check the Danish GDP per capita, even during COVID, the economy was still rising. And more importantly is of course how that is divided. Where does the money come from when it comes to the expenditure? Well, if you check in the blue here, 83.5% of that is coming straight from the government, i.e. in form of our taxes, where health insurance schemes only cover 2.5%. I specifically have a health insurance plan for myself and my daughter is covered under that. That is something that can help aid with like additional costs when it comes to going to the dentist, when it comes to paying for certain type of medicine, operation and stuff like that, which by the way you can already get through the normal means, but it's just to reduce cost in case of. And on average for a Danish family or household, you will only have about 13% of the amount that you spend in total out of pocket to pay for extra stuff, let's say medicine. This means that, as mentioned, prescription medication is not free, but it is subsidized on a sliding scale, meaning that having the government involved here makes it so that they can mitigate the prices that pharmaceutical companies are putting on the medication that we need, i.e. you will never spend more than $600 a year on medication. A great example will be a company like Novo Nordisk, you know, the ones who are making your EpiPens and your insulin medication. I'm choosing this one because it is one of the most inflated medication in the US. You will never find yourself in a situation here where you need to avoid taking your shot and die. Now furthermore, you can break down the expenditure with regards to whom is actually providing what, whether it is hospitals, the providers of ambulatory healthcare, which I know is a huge thing in the US. Nobody ever takes a freaking ambulance.
He was the one who filed the paperwork saying that he resuscitated me. Okay. So I had the DNR in place on my chest for the reason that I did not want to be brought back to life if anything was to happen to me.
Okay, you have, I'm going to make sure I'm hearing this correctly. You have DNR on your chest.
Yes. Which
tattooed on your chest.
Yes, which means do not resuscitate. So Malcolm here
which
resuscitated
means do
me.
not resuscitate.
Yes, and he resuscitated me without my consent. And that's why we're here.
Well, okay.
Now, I tend to stay rather healthy towards the entire year. With the occasional, like, cold when the weather is shifting, I don't really get sick. But I have a sister who occasionally gets struck with some blood sugar issues. That's something that she had her entire life, and she will call upon me to come and pick her up in her apartment and drive her out to take tests, because I think it's the responsible thing to do and not just risk something happening to you on the way to the hospital when you're taking public transportation. She can, if it is even necessary, we can call an ambulance without the extra cost of it. They will pick us up. But when you arrive to the hospital, beside the rather long waiting times that you can have there, which can be more hours, nevertheless, the scannings are done, the treatment are given to you, and all of that is done for free. Staying in a hospital is done for free. Giving birth to your child carrying your child when they're born, having that physical contact is for free. And I'm knowing that I'm saying the word free here is obviously meant as in paid through taxation, but the whole concept is that the things that you've paid through your regular work without having to think about like extra thing to add up on the cost, they are done through simple means. And so the reason why I'm stating these things is not to brag in any way whatsoever. It's simply just to point out that I get baffled whenever I hear the hurdles that people have to go through to get basic health care in the US. It is wild to me. Here's the thing, last year while making a reaction video to an Australian YouTuber, Mars Topins, who was traveling alongside his buddies to Hollywood, I think it was, and later on to Las Vegas, they came across this part which might have been Skid Row or something of the sort. And in the way that I tend to provide commentary for videos, I talked about some of the history of the area, which led me down a rabbit hole of research about the broken system of healthcare there, where I came to learn that in 2006, about 26,000 people died each year from a lack of health insurance, which was twice as much as many people who were murdered. And this all the while the United Health Group, the parent company of that of the CEO who was unalive, being the 8th biggest company in the world in terms of revenue. And for such a big company, you need to do something especially wrong to have people set their sights on you. Enemy spotted. Yeah, that type of sight, so that they can inevitably send a message. And yes, they've done something ridiculous. Because if we look at insurance claim denials here, right, the worst companies to do that, on the very top here, we'll find United Healthcare, who denied more than 1/3 of every claim that people make. And if you do this, I did it for like my lonesome, in the industry average is about 16%. I mean, it's 100% more than the average. And of course, in a country that has been for many years demonizing anything that carries the word social in it, it is affecting the bottom line. Low-income families who spend more than 1/3 of their income on insurances for their own health. And so naturally, if you're not an American citizen like myself and get interested in figuring out what happens here, you go straight into the Medicare.gov website to try and figure out what it's actually about, because it is supposed to be the equivalent of what we have here. And here's the fun part, because Medicare is comprised of 4 parts, which is A, B, C, and D. Part A here is completely free. That's the one that you get through paying taxes, and it covers like the occasional visits to the hospital. And then you have Part B, which is an optional add-on. It costs you about $175 a month, and that is something that is going to cover such things as home health care, certain surgeries, medical equipment, stuff like that. And both of these parts are of course administered by the government to the healthcare agency that you are dealing with, a hospital or whatever. About, I think, was it 98% of it is provided through your taxpayer money, right? Well, around this 2% is provided to the people who are actually administering the care, i.e. your nurses, the doctors, the people who have to write documentation and give you prescription. And we wonder why nurses are never happy. Look, my mom worked as a nurse for quite a few years here in Denmark, and she would never dream of working in the US. Now, the more astute among you would have noticed that Part C is not present here, and that's because this one has nothing to do with the government anymore. This is provided by private insurance companies. Yes, they are the ones who are listed in this very wonderful list here, the likes of Aetna, who want to urge you to do your best to get into their plan of how much money they want to extort out of you to provide you care. They especially tend to drag the elderly into this with ads that you might have seen in the past, the likes of William Shatner, when he isn't talking World of Warcraft, will be starring in healthcare insurance ads.
I've been on Medicare for longer than I'll admit, and it sure has changed.
That quite deceptively make use of the Medicare brand as to suggest that this is something that is more related to the traditional things that you will get through paying your taxes. But once you actually have to deal with it, it is extremely expensive. So alright, healthcare insurances are incredibly expensive, so why are people opting to choose them over just the norm? Well, it's because going to normal means is even more insane. I've made jokes in the past about friends of mine who were going to travel abroad because they had some things to achieve on the bucket list, and while the couple were pregnant, at least my friend's partner was pregnant, they wanted to go to the US before that happened. And so we jokingly talked about whether or not it was responsible for them to actually do that, what would happen if the baby was happening before they actually got home. And I jokingly brought the argument of the fact that it costs you about, what is it, $30 for you to have physical contact with your child? Yeah, and staying in the hospital when you are being treated will cost you an insane amount of money. I believe that there was a stat saying that about 2 weeks of care in a hospital will take you about $1 million to pay back. Like how? How is that normal? How have you allowed a system to get this bad? Well, for most things, as a person who has been slightly fan of certain part of history, especially with regards to the US, I will credit the likes of that to the one individual that has set America in a very weird predicament in history, Ronald Reagan.
Democracy that have marked the history of this city. America missed me.
Who in his time, like many presidents before him, was trying to stifle the progression of anything that was going to be red, i.e. communist. Again, Reagan was not the first one to do this, but with his acting chops and more of an approachable personality, he carried with him a lot of charisma, and he managed to make a lot of people believe that paying more in taxes was going to rob them from certain expertise. It was going to make things too socialist, rob people of their freedom, as the argument always is. So think of such things as Operation Coffee Cup, when Reagan was speaking on behalf of a lot of things that were encroaching on the American freedoms, while at the same time creating the myth of the welfare queen, and of course creating the huge wealth disparity that was had by breaking down unions and so much more. I don't understand how the man is often viewed as being an American hero. It's just weird to me.
Socialism on a people has been by way of medicine. It's very easy to disguise a medical program as a humanitarian project. Most people are a little reluctant to oppose anything that suggests medical care for people who possibly can't afford it. Well, you and I can do a great deal. We can write to our congressmen, to our senators. We can say right now that we want no further encroachment on these individual liberties and freedoms. And at the moment, the key issue is we do not want socialized medicine. In Washington today, 40,000 letters, less than 100 per congressman, are evidence of a trend in public thinking. Representative Halleck of Indiana has said, when the American people want something from Congress, regardless of its political complexion, if they make their wants known, Congress does what the people want. And if this man writes back to you and tells you that he too is for free enterprise, but we have these great services and so forth that must be performed by government, don't let him get away with it. Show that you have not been convinced. Write a letter right back and tell him that you believe in government economy and fiscal responsibility, that you know that governments don't tax to get the money they need. Governments will always find a need for the money they get, and that you demand the continuation of our traditional free enterprise system.
So when generations upon generations are bombarded with a message like that having to pay for more to make sure that the government does cover all of those things, for which again Reagan gave massive tax cuts to the elite who were supposed to contribute a fair share to the system, is a bad thing, you end up having what these private insurance companies are doing now. The parent company of United Healthcare has grown with $43 billion just over the past year, And how did they do that? Not by having individuals sitting on the other end of the phone line when you're calling in to try to figure out what the hell is going on with your health insurance. No, by doing what most companies are doing nowadays. Efficiency, automation, by making use of such things as an algorithm called ALERT, standing for Algorithms for Effective Reporting and Treatment. And this was done by them as a risk to mitigate the risk of overutilization of the services, i.e. if you are a person who is suffering of, let's say, mental health care, right? That's a thing that we are being a bit more conscious about nowadays. They were regulating the amount of therapy sessions that you could attend. This company was so mad in the way that they denied insurance claims that they had to outsource it to another company called AviCore.
It is not a good name.
I mean, the spelling. That gets paid per denial.
I just can't do it. I can't take this shit no more, man.
They had such an influence on the market to the point where they became the regulator of what people had to consume as medicine and not what the recommendation actually was from the doctors. I don't need to explain this to anybody to understand how bad that can be. I have a partner who relies on having, let's say, her ADHD medication, and just having it provided by another brand through another doses is detrimental to how her health is during a given period. And so just imagine that for a person who's not just neurodivergent but then suffers from a litany of other underlying things. I cannot fathom that companies like this get to even be in business. So people are devastated. People are in financial ruin because of this. They are distraught. So it's not difficult to understand how they will feel about the passing of an individual who is responsible for so much. And of course, I want to have sympathy for a person like this still, yes, because the man had families, he had kids, and as a father myself, I won't say that I feel sorry for them. Well, at the same time, you hear that the man, the CEO, was doing a pump and dump scheme at the very point where the... it keeps getting worse. And so I want to read you a tweet. A fake tweet at this. I want to preface this so that you understand that this is not from the actual First Lady of the United States at the moment, but this fake tweet from @Elon Musk states the following. It has been brought to my attention that some Americans are actually cheering for the gunman who killed United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, and that they're saying that this is a warning to all CEOs. What these people fail to understand is that without CEOs, the world will not be able to function, and as CEOs, we are responsible for the delicate balance act of generating profit for shareholders, while also ensuring that shareholders are able to maintain their own personal wealth, in spite of the typical corporate laziness and greed of middle management and their staff. America will be destitute without us. #Doge. Now, the tweet is obviously fake because Elon will never put a statement like that. He's dumb, but he's not that dumb to be straightforward with his business practices. Yet it is indicative of the feeling that some people out there had with regards to this incident, like Andrew Whitty, the CEO of the United Health Group, who made a response video to the response that the whole wide world has been having to this event, making him sound like one of the worst rendition of a Resident Evil villain ever.
And I want to reassure you of a few things. Firstly, we are going to continue to make sure that we put patients, consumers and members first, as we always have done. And there are very few people in the history of the US healthcare industry who had a bigger positive effect on American healthcare than Brian.
This might be me not being charitable enough, but this is more or less him saying, we'll fucking do it again. How about the take of Ben, our only debate high schooler Shapiro, who tried to make this into a politicized issue that only the left can see this as an actual problem and go against CEOs, and got absolutely roasted by his own comment section. Like, people are hurting. And you want to defend a company that made use of a faulty AI that had a 90% error rate to deny elderly patients for especially cancer treatment, and say what? Make it into a left or right issue? It is maddening, and it is so sad to see people in a situation like this, where they have to cheer for somebody to be unalived. And this is of course not to say that the whole wide of the world should be adopting a system like, let's say, the one that I made an introduction to in the start of the video, the one that I'm living under, the one that Scandinavia has.
The US associate the Nordic model with some sort of socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. The Nordic model is an expanded welfare state which provides a high level of security for its citizens, but it is also a successful market economy with much freedom to pursue your dreams and live your life as you wish.
That's not about that. It's just to state that the one that you have right now is so freaking broken that you absolutely need a change. Because never ever have I felt like if I were living in the US that I would be better off with your healthcare system. I have had desires for this. Most people who in the younger days, in their adolescence, would have had a dream of moving to the United States, right? Because you are the place of entertainment. There is a lot to be gained from there. There is a certain level of expertise that American doctors have. The problem, however, is that this expertise does not directly translate to the actual benefit that you get in your healthcare. The thing is, even that expertise does not rank you that high, because this is a study that is made by the Commonwealth Fund that do this type of thing every other year, and virtually every single time the US is dead last. You are not getting better care than the other countries. The only thing that you are second best at here is the care process, where you're ranking rather high in second place. But anything beside that, efficiency, equity, outcomes, even care access, right? Fundamental, dead last. Again, I have to reiterate this is not me justifying the act of terrorism that were committed here. I can't believe that we have to continuously say this, but it says quite something that mainstream media is more infatuated with the idea that people are liking the fact that Luigi came out of the New York City pipeline and shot a CEO, and not looking for the underlying factor that ended up creating this act of terrorism. But when a shooter has bullet casing where it is written deny, defend and depose, tactics that are usually used by insurance companies to do what they do best, you've got to ask yourself, maybe there's something broken here. Maybe this is a politically charged thing that needs to be addressed correctly. Now, this of course doesn't mean that every single CEO should be in fear of a dude in a $400 kit, including the mask, the gun, the bullet casing, and of course the monopoly money. Oh, he also had an e-bike, should be chasing after them. No, but more of these insurance companies should be aware that they are now going to be held up more to scrutiny. And this should just be a standard, okay? This should be a standard in a country like that, where ultra-capitalism is ruining everything. And of course, that is spreading to the rest of the world. Again, I'm not saying that what we have here is somewhat of a perfect system. It has its flaws, from long waiting time and sometimes also surgery issues. I have a mother who has suffered from a lot of health issues, some chronic, some not, but a lot of the underlying issues that she has had have been caused by misdiagnosis, so issues like that do occur. And even if we were to ask our neighbors across the pond at the NHS, they will tell you that our systems compared to the US is night and day. So like, to the CEOs who might be worried about this, the ball is in your court. You have the power to change this. If you're truly worried about a situation like this, you have to stop the greed. It's as simple as that. You don't have to grow your company by 43 billion in a year. It's gonna get costly, certainly expensive for a lot of you, but that might be the right thing to do. The moral thing to do. But yeah, this has been my take on this entire thing. It's just scary. And the same thing happens when we're talking about American schools and so many other acts of terror. Like, there are some underlying issues that just never gets addressed, and how somehow trying to adapt a different system, treating your workers better, treating students better. Children. Fucking children, man. It's somehow, no, it's impossible. We need to stick with the way that things have always been. And we as outsiders are just looking at that and being like, what the fuck is wrong with you? It's crazy. And the wildest thing about this is that he was supposed to attend a shareholders meeting where numbers were going up, right? And to celebrate. And an hour after this thing broke, they still held the party. So, bro was expendable. Damn. And also, I have to preface that this is not a political issue, okay? Across the board, people hate them. And the health insurance companies here are going to choose whomever they wish for, whether you're Democrat or Republican. Right now, of course, the upcoming administration have people in them that are of cartoonish caricature, the likes of Rick Scott, a senator who was once the cause of America's biggest healthcare fraud case, swindled millions, ruined the life of hundreds and thousands, who through his for-profit hospitals did the one thing that every private equity firm are known for, turning people's life into a metric of profit. Adjustable PE ratios and a means for tax exemption. Yet still, he got away with it and still does scam people. But this dude, who doesn't as much as smile but rather lock into new praise, became a senator and almost made it to the majority of the Senate to lead for the administration. How? And don't even get me started on the brainworm guy. But like, that's on the Republican side of things, while on the other side, you have companies such as Blue Cross Group, yes, those who backed up from the anesthesia bullshit, who backed up the Democratic Party. So, it doesn't matter to them. Whomever was going to win, they were going to be siding with them as long as they make them money. So again, this might be the take of a socialist or whatever you want to call me, but when a big company is trying to screw you over, see that. The pattern is there. Establish that and make your choices, do your demonstration, do whatever you want to do to ensure that your family, your loved ones don't have to suffer from this. That's all I have to say. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below and still wish you all to have a wonderful day. Bye.